Well, hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of the Facts in Fatherhood podcast. I am your host, Demetrius, and I am so glad to be able to come back to you once again with another great episode of the Facts in Fatherhood podcast. You know, I say it on every single podcast. My only goal is to help all of the dads that I possibly can to love being a father the way that I love being a father. And today is no different. And so I am so happy that we have another great guest on the podcast today that is going to be able to come and share with us some really, really, really great things that's going to help us all be much, much, much better. Yeah, because guess what? Our goal, as we always say, is to just try our very best to do our very, 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 very best every single day, and then try and make our best better. So I'm so glad that you and I have another opportunity to be better today. Well, you know, I always have to ask you, make sure that you do me a huge favor. I want you to make sure that you subscribe to the channel. I want you to make sure that you like. I want to make sure that you share. All right. The information that we have available for you today is going to be so powerful and so helpful and essential in our development as fathers and our development as men. So listen, go ahead, do me that favor, subscribe. I want you to like, I want you to share. I want you to go down to the website and I want you to get your hands on some of the great merch that is available to you. Listen, this is one of my favorite pieces right here. This is a little hoodie. We have it in a t-shirt and all the things. It says, boy, don't let the devil fool you. This is something that my dad used to say quite often. And so we just dedicated a lot of our product to a lot of the statements and phrases that my dad would make in his memory and in his honor. And this is one of the things that he would often say, boy, don't let the devil fool you. And so I am excited for everybody that's going to get your hands on this hoodie, get your hands on this t-shirt, the hands on the baseball cap, the mug, whatever. Some of them say boys, some of them say girls, some of them say bro, some of them just say, hey, don't let the devil fool you. But whatever you do, make sure you don't let the devil fool you. Look, some other great merchandise like this fatherhood journal, right? It's a target practice journal that you have the opportunity to kind of just record your journey as you're going along in your development as a man, your development as a father, just to kind of help you track and be able to log some of the things you might want to go back and take a look at, right? And then my favorite of them all, I am so excited that this little tool is getting ready to be in your hands very, very soon. That release date is coming. This book called Like Arrows in My Hand literally is dealing, of course, with parenthood, but it emphasizes the role of the father, right, in the life of their child. So I'm excited about you having an opportunity to get your hands on this particular tool, this particular resource. I believe this is going to help parents and fathers everywhere. All right. So do me a favor, go on over to that website. Make sure you take a moment and you look at all of those things there on the site. Okay. And let's go ahead and get the tools and get the things that will help us be better in our role as fathers. Well, just like every single time, we have a great guest in our midst that we're welcoming to the Facts and Fatherhood studio. I want everybody to do me a favor, and we can't hear you, but just go ahead and give a round of applause. Go ahead and do a drum roll, whatever it is you're going to do. And I want you to welcome my guest to the Facts and Fatherhood podcast in the person of Armin Brock. Welcome to the show, my sir. How are
Well,
you today?
great to be with you, Demetrius. I'm doing just fine.
Good, good. So we're excited to have you in the studio. And listen, from what I have been made to understand, this gentleman has been referred to by Time as the super dad. Wow, wow. What is that? What is up with that? The super dad. Can you tell me a little bit more about you being the super dad? That is awesome.
Well, that's the kind of thing that you never come up with by yourself, because if you did, your kids would remind you every day that you don't know anything about being a dad and that they know much more about it. But it was something Time magazine, I don't know, probably close to 20 years ago now, came out because I've written a number of books on fatherhood. We could talk about those. And they were really the only books for dads out there at the time. There have been a few that have come and gone, but mine are still out there, still doing well. I'm constantly updating them. And so Time magazine wanted to do an article about this guy in California who's writing these books about fatherhood that nobody else had been writing about. So they came out and spent a day hanging around with me and the kids, and it was fun. And so
Yeah.
no, nobody got injured. So it was a good day.
Yeah, but pretty cool to be called super dad. I just
It's
have to,
it's fun.
just have to say.
Yeah.
So, well, we're going to tell you a little bit about our guest. He's pretty much the co-founder and the president of what is called Healthy Men Inc. And of
Yep.
course, y'all, we're talking today about curating healthy manhood. We need to talk about what that looks like. There's some misconceptions out there, and all the different things. And so, Armin, tell us a little bit more about yourself and your work and what you do. We like to hear a little bit more of that.
Okay. So when my kids were little, which is a long time ago, you can see from all the gray hair how long ago it was. I started writing these books about fatherhood, and but they were basically the books that I wish I would have had, because when I started getting into it, when I was an expectant father the first time, there weren't any books or resources or classes or DVDs or any of the stuff that I've subsequently had to create. So I ended up writing the first book, which is called The Expectant Father, which dealt with, or still deals with, pregnancy and childbirth, but from the dad's perspective. What do you need to know about what's going on with your partner, how she's changing and developing and growing? And what do you need to know about what's going on with that baby that's getting bigger and bigger inside of her? And most importantly, though, the really most important part of the whole thing is, what do you need to know about yourself, how you're changing? What are you thinking about? What should you be thinking about? How are you going to make this pregnancy and the baby that comes out of it, how are you going to make that your own? Because it's very easy. I mean, obviously she's the one who's carrying the baby. It's easy for us to get a little disconnected and to even sometimes forget about the whole thing for a couple of days or whatever, while she's pregnant. So that's what I wanted to do, was to do very much what you talk about, to give dads the tools and the skills and the knowledge that they need about themselves, about the whole process, to be the kind of involved fathers that they want to be, and that their kids need them to be, and their partner need them to be. So that's what I tried to do with that book. And it was my first book. I had no idea how these things were going to go. It did really well. And the publisher said, you ought to write something for new fathers now that you've written for expectant fathers. So I did one for the first year, then one for the toddler years, one for the school years. I served in the military and Marine Corps for a while, and started to get, right around 2001, after 9/11, a lot of email from service members and their partners, their wives, saying, I don't know, what do I do? What do I do? I'm about to be deployed, or I just got back from deployment. I haven't seen my wife or kids for 9 months. What am I supposed to do? So I wrote a book about fathers in the military and how they could stay involved and connected throughout, regardless of how old. And meanwhile, while all that's going on, I'm also working on men's health issues, because a lot of the stuff there's a lot of overlap. Fathers tend not to take terribly good care of themselves, or men generally tend not to take good care of themselves. But when a guy is an expectant father and a new father, the whole provider protector thing that we've got going goes into high gear. And we tend to focus even less on ourselves, take even worse care of ourselves, because we want to take care of everybody else. We want to make sure that we're there for the mom. We want to make sure that we're there for the kids. And so I started working almost as long, probably. Well, I've been working on it for more than 20 years now. I've been focusing on fatherhood and men's health. And so I started about 4 years ago with two colleagues that I've worked with for a long time, a group called Healthy Men Inc., which you mentioned, and it's healthymen.org. And the two guys, they're terrific. You should have them on the show at one point. One of them is a retired pharmacist who knows everything there is to know about medication. And the other one is a gentleman named Jean Bonhomme, who's founded an organization called the National Black Men's Health Network. And he deals quite a bit with Black men's health, which is unfortunately worse in just about every single way than average, than the nation as a whole. And it's tragic. I mean, men's health generally is in a worse situation than women's health. For example, men live about 6 years shorter lives than women do. For Black men, it's even worse. And we can talk about some of that if you'd like to. So that's what I'm doing. And what we try to do with the Healthy Men is very much the same message and the same idea that I have and that you and I share, which is to give men the tools that they need to understand how important they are, how important their health is, and what to do about it, how to take better care of yourself. At the same time, we recognize that this is not just a fix the men situation. That's part of it. That's an important part of it. The other important part of it is that the healthcare system itself is messed up. It really is. And it is, when it comes to men, it's especially messed up, and it's not welcoming. It does not, men don't feel comfortable in healthcare settings. It's mostly women in healthcare settings, and men don't always feel comfortable talking about what's going on with them, particularly if it happens to be between the belt and the knees. Don't want to talk to a woman about that. Don't even want to talk to their wife about it, but let alone a stranger. So if the healthcare system itself is not recognizing that men have different needs than women do. I mean, just to give you two of the biggest examples, 80% of all suicides are men. That's a significant mental health issue, a mental health crisis, in my view, that we've got going on here. There are more men killed by suicide than by murder. It's awful. And when we hear about all the gun deaths, there's something like 30,000 gun deaths every year in this country. Well, 20,000 of those are suicides. And we don't talk about that. We talk about gun death like it's just some random thing. So that's the suicides. And then very close to that is what we call diseases of despair, having to do with anxiety and depression, which show up as drug overdoses, alcohol-related overdoses, that kind of thing. And 70% of those, 7 out of 10, are men and young men especially. And it's those two things right there should be enough to put men's health, and particularly men's mental health, on the national front pages and in front of everybody in Congress to do something about it. It's not happening. And so what we at Healthy Men are trying to do is to fix the healthcare system by educating the people who are involved, whether they're providers, drug and alcohol counselors, even athletic coaches in schools and colleges, people who deal with men and boys, how to connect with them, in a way that makes sense, that resonates with them, that is going to get them to come into the doctor's office. Because we can talk all day about fixing the healthcare system, but if we don't talk to the men and say, here's why you should come in, and here's how often you should come in, and here's what you should do when you come in, if we don't do that, if we don't put those two pieces together, it's not going to work. So it's both. It's saying to the guys, this is why you're important. You don't want to take care of yourself? Okay, you don't have to take care of yourself, but think for just a minute. Your partner and your kids would really like you to be around. They really would. So maybe do it for them. You want to? Yeah. That's okay. We don't care. Not making any judgments about this. Oh no, sometimes we do make some judgments. Like, come on, take better care of yourself. Stop smoking. That kind of thing. So we do that, and then we say to the healthcare system, look, you need to talk to these men differently. You can do what if you talk to them differently, and you create events, and you have office hours that are conducive to having men come in, instead of having the offices shut at 4:00 when most guys are out there in the office still. If you want them to come in and you want to save lives, which is what's going to happen, this is what you got to do. This is how you're going to need to talk to them. So that's what we do. And we've got an online course that we made available to providers and county healthcare workers and all sorts of people that work with men and boys, and have had some terrific results. People are really happy with it. They're really implementing what they've learned in the course, and they feel that it's helped them greatly in their interactions with men and boys. So that's kind of a summary of what we do. And it's really, it's again, it's like what you're doing with Facts and Fathers. It's a passion project. We've got information, we've got knowledge, we've got resources, and we want to share those with as many people as we can, because it sounds maybe a little self-promoting, but it really isn't. We're trying to save lives here, and not only save lives, but we're trying to improve the quality of the lives of those same lives. And the way that we do that is with education, and with giving people resources and giving people trusted sources of quality information.
Wow, I love it. That's incredibly important work, because as you mentioned earlier, as I kind of started getting into this space, just really wanting to offer, what I had available primarily from my life experience. Just really wanting, and of course my work as a pastor, and and counseling with families and people and all these kind of different things. It just caused me to just want to do something to really try to be an answer. And this is kind of why we're here, with this podcast, and just as a small part of what we're doing, to try to be of assistance, because when I looked around, I mean, talking about parenthood, I just felt like there was tons and tons and tons of information and things for women, for the mothers, and we need that, and that's good, and that's helpful, and we want that. But I was like, man, it just seems like there's a vacuum, like just a huge gap of what is available out there, resource-wise, available for me. And so thank you so much for your work. It's very, very important work. I know you've been doing this for over 2 decades now. So, this is definitely needed. And we definitely need to continue on, 5 decades and more, in doing this very, very important work. I thought that was very cool on your website. I did see that was a program where you're kind of teaching people and educating people, or you can get certified on being basically a health advocate. If I basically kind of utilize those words, you could probably put that in better terminology, but it seems like it was just education that was available there for there to be a certification in this space. And I want to be able to kind of come back and talk about that as well. But you mentioned something that when we talk about men's health, I think probably is one of those things that has tentacles that reaches to like all of the aspects of kind of the things that, the statistics that you kind of mentioned, because those are alarming statistics. And when you look at the reality of the family dynamics, there's already the dynamic of men who are missing, in their role as fathers for one reason or another. So, gosh, I mean, this health issue, taking more fathers out of the home, or out of the conversation is, just one of those other bells is kind of like going off that we really need to give more attention to and highlight. And so what you mentioned was the issues with the mental health, the mental aspect of this. And I know a lot of times in our society, there are different things that are attached to men as it relates to how they manage or how we manage our emotions. And the reason why we're focusing on the reality of the man, because I learned even in my own journey that the better I develop myself as a man, the more effective I could be in all the things I have to do as a father, as a husband, and all of that. And so when we look at that mental aspect, there's certain things that are in our language certain things that are in the mentality of a lot of areas of our society that, are probably as unwelcoming as the healthcare industry. And so I'm curious to know your thoughts about this notion of toxic manhood. I'm really curious. I want to just kind of explore that for a moment. Talk to us about about the reality about the notion or the concept of toxic masculinity. Let's talk about that one there.
Well, in many ways, I would just like to say, no, we're not going to talk about that because, but we're going to. I find it really annoying that, yes, there are some men who behave badly, and there are some women who behave badly. And somehow when you use the phrase toxic masculinity, and it's not just a phrase, it goes along with, it's kind of an explanation. So somebody comes across a guy who's behaving like a jerk, and they say, oh, that's just toxic masculinity. We have to do something about toxic masculinity. It's as though every man, and by extension, every boy, is flawed somehow, that there's something wrong. It's a concept, like the concept of original sin. You're born a man, therefore you're toxic. And there's something wrong with you, and we have to fix you. And it's insulting. I mean, at the very least, it's insulting and it's infuriating, which I suppose taps in. Somebody's now going to say, oh, you're infuriated, you're angry, therefore that's toxic masculinity. Well, you know what? I think I have every right to be angry about this particular thing. And it's the messages that we get. You get girls rule, boys drool. So we're told that girls are better. And there's nothing wrong with female empowerment. I think it's a wonderful thing, and girls need to develop self-esteem and self-confidence, but you don't have to take your wins at somebody else's expense. It's one of these things that the colleague I mentioned, Jean Bonhomme, is always coming up with these great phrases, and I've heard it before, but he puts it nicely that the rising tide lifts all boats. And when one person benefits, everybody benefits, and that's what I try to get across with focusing on men's health. And I have to, every time I do a speech about men's health, I have to say at some point in there, well, we're not taking anything away from women's health. This is not to say we're not going to talk about women's health. This is to say focusing on women's health has saved probably millions of lives by getting it onto the front burner. All these races for the cure and breast cancer marches and cervical cancer and HPV vaccines have saved and improved many, many, many lives. There is no reason why we can't do that for men, and why there's every reason why we have to do it. So that's important, but it's not, as you're exactly right, it's not just the healthcare system. It's not just individual men trying to be masculine. That one of the other phrase that's out there that kind of goes along with toxic masculinity, and you wouldn't think that they could exist in the same world because one of them reinforces the other, is man up. We talk about man up. And so at the same time as we're telling men that they're toxic for being aggressive or for being pushing for success or whatever, we're also telling them, man up, don't cry, don't complain, play through your injuries, take one for the team, all these kinds of things. And how can you drill that into boys and men's heads and then not expect them to be aggressive and pushy and to ignore their symptoms and to not talk about their feelings because that's what you've told them to do? It's very frustrating to have two of those things at the same time being thrown at men, and there's no winning. It's just a lose-lose situation. If you are, and just to give you an example, we're not going to get into politics here, but people probably remember the Brett Kavanaugh hearings, the Senate confirmation hearings when Brett Kavanaugh was nominated for the Supreme Court. And he was being accused by someone that he had known in high school for having sexually assaulted her something like 40 years before. And okay, that's something that should be discussed, I mean, especially for a Supreme Court justice. But he got angry in his testimony, and he cried at one point in the testimony. And there was so much coverage of what a wimp. Well, he's not judicial. He's not acting in a very in a regal or whatever, a good way. Not somebody that would be, we wouldn't want to have this kind of a person who cries. What a baby. I mean, are you serious? You've been telling us for the last 50 years that we should get in touch with our emotions and our feminine side. And then when somebody actually does, when somebody's accused him of a terrible crime, what do you expect him to do? And if he would have sat there and done nothing, then people would have said, he's stoic. He should get in touch with his feminine side. So it's, in other words, it's lose-lose. And I just, as somebody, my kids are old. They're in their 30s. One's still in her 20s. But, so I'm not worried about necessarily the next generation. They're already taking care of themselves. But as fathers, we need to pay attention to the kinds of role models that we are. And as people living in society, maybe who are not in a position to be role models ourselves, we have to look at what's going on with the role models that so many young men have, particularly in low-income areas or inner-city areas where the father is not as present in the homes as he would like to be or should be or could be possibly. And we can talk about some of that. But so you have a bunch of young men who don't have a role model, and they connect with a charismatic, I don't know, we'll just call him a thug, who tells them that the way to be a man is to beat somebody up. You got to show people that you're tough. You got to show people that you're not going to take any crap from anybody. And that's not the kind of role models that we need. And it's not the kind of role models that these young men need. But because the system, unfortunately, is set up so that in order to collect welfare benefits or SNAP benefits, what used to be food stamps, the father cannot be living in the house. That sets up this weird dynamic. It's hard to comprehend that we're going to complain that fathers are absent, but we're going to tell women who are not married to the father that if they want to collect the benefits that they need to pay rent and pay for food, that they can't live in the same house as the father of the kids. I mean, if it weren't so sad, it would be like a comedy routine. But that's where we are. And so these kids are growing up without a dad in the house. They're going out, they're meeting somebody, somebody they probably shouldn't meet, but there isn't a dad who's sitting down with them and having dinner with them every night and saying, hey, how'd you do in school? And are you getting that paper done? How's your homework going? Who are your friends? That kind of stuff that we try to do with our kids. We don't get it done every single day usually, but if you try, but if there's nobody there, then you're going to get a bunch of kids and who are going to be the poster children of toxic masculinity, unfortunately. But it's okay to paint all men with that brush of toxic masculinity. It wouldn't be okay to say toxic femininity. I've had experiences, pretty much every man I know has had experiences when he was dating or with a former wife of a woman who didn't behave particularly well. Maybe she cheated, maybe she hit the kids, whatever it is. But we all have experiences with people of the opposite sex who don't behave well. But we don't say all women, toxic femininity, or it's just offensive. That's the summary. It's offensive, and I wish we didn't have to talk about it, but I'm glad we do talk about it because I think people need to really recognize that they're doing people a disservice by telling boys that they're flawed, that they need fixing, that there's something wrong with them just because they're boys. What is that going to do for their self-esteem as they grow up?
Yeah, it's a It's interesting. I was just recently in a conversation with some friends of mine, and one of the things we're talking about is kind of the dynamic of, you know, how, yes, between men and women, there are these differences that exist, primarily because we've been designed for, different things for different reasons. Even in the family dynamic, the father adds different things than the mother does. Both
Yeah.
contributions are very important, equally important. And when I thought about this, one of the things I have done in my research is I happened one day, can't remember exactly what I was kind of searching for, but somehow I was kind of digging through some of the things. There's a couple fatherhood exchanges that are through like fatherhood.gov and these sort of different things. Some of these exchanges, and as I'm digging through it, I'm kind of doing research. Somehow, a list of holidays pops up, right? And when I see this list of holidays, I can't remember exactly what the number was, but I do know like Father's Day was way, 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 way down on the list. And I think the most alarming thing about that was that Father's Day ranked below Arbor Day. And I was like, wow, people
Harbor
have
Day.
more affection for trees than
Yeah.
they do their fathers. Just, and I think as we were in our conversation, I was talking about the reality of how a lot of times we look at those differences and sometimes we make different bad, right? When
Yeah.
different serves a purpose and there's a reason, for there being, those differences.
Yes.
And
Yeah.
I said, I think the trouble we get into is that anytime we dehumanize an individual, and just one of the ways or one of the mentalities that I think that sometimes causes us to dehumanize, because anytime you dehumanize, you devalue. And when I dehumanize a person, it means that I suggest in some way, or this is just one way that it happens. I suggest in some way that that person does not have the exact same needs, basic needs, as the next human being, regardless of whether they are male or female. So when you think about it, basic needs, chief among the basic needs of every human being on the face of the planet, male or female, is the need to be heard and understood, right? Now, if I put all these barriers up there, that, prevent me from, you know, utilizing the natural means of being heard and understood, which means, you know, it's okay for me, whether I am male or female, man or woman, boy, girl, it's okay for me to express how I am feeling in a moment. It's okay for me to say those things, and when I say those things, or if in the case you said, like, I shed those tears, I kind of think about my favorite team. I think it's pretty obvious to the people that watch the podcast. My favorite football team is the Houston Texans, you know, and I remember during the season, um, our QB had developed a really, really close relationship uh, with this little wide receiver. And these guys came in together. They were, drafted together when CJ got drafted. There was a phone call, was like, hey, man, I want them to pick me up as well. And so um, we were playing the Chiefs, I believe. This was not this past season, but the season before. We were playing the Chiefs. And man, he was having such a good game. And that was a point where he got tackled and he had a severe leg injury, which put him out the entire, this past league. He was out the entire season. And so when that happened to him, and everybody's on the sidelines and the medics are trying to, deal with him, the QB is having an emotional moment. Like he's crying, right? That's just not a wide receiver for him. That's his buddy, that's his pal, that's his friend. And I remember like on some of the social media posts and stuff like that, that it almost was kind of made as if, oh man, why is he out there being a wimp? Why is he crying? Why is he, shedding those tears like that? Guys, I don't know if we have he was kind of like put in the category of being a soft guy. He's a soft quarterback. So I don't know if he's going to be as confident in his play. It was just all the things. And I'm like, how does him showing a human emotional moment that not only is this his teammate, not only is this his wide receiver, this is literally his friend.
Yeah.
And so he's concerned about his friend. And to me, it's like, man, this is like somebody who's really showing compassion. It's like, man, I hope he's going to be okay. Man, I hope he's going to be all right. Like, why is there something wrong with him, expressing that? And I think sometimes we get in that space where we kind of create this thing. Like, I even remember when children were growing up, we were having this conversation and we were talking about how, a man, boys should not be hitting on girls. Men should not be hitting on women. And that's true, right? There should not be abuse in any sort of way. And so when we were in the middle of the conversation, I ended up offering, and I said, okay, let me just offer this. I said, I think probably the best rule, right? That's a good rule. But I believe the best rule that I think I've ever heard concerning this situation is everybody learn to keep their hands to themselves, because nobody should be hit on, right? Yeah. I think sometimes we lose the balance whenever we get to the point where we dehumanize, because if we dehumanize in any way, even in the smallest way, if we dehumanize, then we also devalue. And I think a lot of ways that's a lot of what is happening, where, I believe it's the thing that leads to, because let's face it, the healthcare system is governed by people, right? And if there's a value system that causes you to look at one group or one person, as, less than human, in some way, you devalue who that individual is. Like, even when you're talking about, is it possible that maybe we can have self-awareness regardless of being male or female, and maybe that's what it is, and perhaps maybe it's not me as a male getting in touch with my feminine side just because I have self-awareness, right? Are you suggesting that it's only feminine to have an awareness of where I am emotionally at the moment? Like, it's not, right? Mm-hmm. So it's things, that are sometimes bred into our language, sometimes bred into our, it's in our mentality. These concepts that we have normalized that we don't even realize are causing this dehumanization, and by default, the devaluation. And I think that's what's toxic, right?
Yeah.
That's what's toxic.
I agree with you. I think we should have one standard. We don't necessarily have, you should not be hitting on people, anybody. As my dad always used to say, your freedom to swing your arms around ends where my nose begins. And that was basically, that was the thing. You don't hit it. I have two younger sisters. So don't hit your sisters, but don't hit anybody. Well, it's not okay to hit men, and it shouldn't be okay for women to hit men. And there are plenty of women who hit men, and we kind of glorify that in movies and TV shows. When a woman hits a man, people cheer. Like, whoa. That, we're saying violence is okay if it's against a man. But, about this toxic masculinity thing, we have to understand that there are places where it is a great benefit to be strong and powerful and ignore your emotions. In the military, for example, I did work with Marines and with Navy SEALs. We want those people to do what they have to do and not have to be worried about whether the wife at home is having problems with the dishwasher. We don't want them to be thinking about, oh my God, their kid got into an accident, a car accident. Is he okay? We want them to focus on their job, because if they're not focused, it's not only military, police Anybody
Mhm.
who's out in that kind of high stress situation, if they don't focus on what's going on and they can't completely shut everything else out, they're going to be a danger to themselves and to others. So if
Right.
there is a place for that, the kinds of stuff that people call toxic masculinity, that stuff
Mhm.
saves lives.
Right.
When anytime there is any kind of a mass shooting, and God knows we have too many of those, but there's almost always cases where a male teacher or fellow students are shielding other people with their bodies,
Mhm.
and they are
Mhm.
getting killed because that's the kind of toxic masculinity that saves lives. So we need to understand that there is a place for that, and we need that. And not only do we need it, we really, really want it. I mean,
Mhm.
women want a man who's going to be strong. I hate to be stereotypical about it or stereotyping anybody, but at the same time, you don't have to be all one or the other. You don't need to be blubbering on all the time. Every time you stub your toe or somebody cuts you off in traffic, you need to be able to deal with that sort of stuff. But so we need to find a balance, and everybody needs to find a balance. But there should be one standard for everybody.
Yeah, that's absolutely true. That's just it's just important, and that was the concept that I tried to explain. Like it's important, that we all recognize, you know, one another as human beings, which means there are certain things that are standard to the human experience.
Yeah.
I remember even one time, just on a personal note, like just kind of trying to deal with certain things. I'm the oldest of four children. Uh, and in 2006, the sister that was born after me, she passed away. 2014, my baby sister passed away.
Oh,
Now, this is really interesting. It's a dynamic, right? Because now we're just kind of talking about the reality of grief. Well, when the first sister passed away, I learned so much about having an awareness of my emotional state. The responsibility that I had in the situation, being the oldest, being the big brother, and all the things. There was some circumstances that required me to kind of lead out, in a lot of ways and try to be strong for my family and strong for my siblings and all the things. And the interesting thing is that I ended up not even knowing it was possible that I could do it, but I ended up carrying grief that I never expressed for a lengthy period of time
yeah.
because I didn't allow myself to do it, right? Because I felt the obligation and the responsibility to, just be there.
Yep.
And it,
Yeah.
it was almost like by default, like it was an accident. Well, I'm gonna say it was an accident, but I think it was almost kind of like my mind kind of got to a certain point, and I had an awareness, like maybe I didn't have it, consciously, but maybe subconsciously. There was kind of an awareness, and I remember I went to this men's conference that they were having, and I get to this men's conference, and it was something about being in that environment where kind of again subconsciously I guess I realized right now there are no children around to be father to. There's no wife around to be husband to. There's no family members. There's no mom, around to try to be strong. There's nobody around to try to be strong for or whatever. And I guess, like I said, subconsciously, I realized that. And this is what I remember happening to me. Like, I was there. There was all these men. They were, rejoicing and all the stuff, all the things. And I just remember it came to a certain point where I was just overwhelmed and I wept like I was two, and then that happened over the course. I was there for 3 days. That happened over the course of 3 days. And it was like after that, and then just having conversations with the other men that were there from all over the world and all the things. And It was something about recognizing that we all are having the same experiences. We're all kind of feeling the same way and thinking the same things, no matter what part of the world we're living in. It was just something, for that experience to be what it was. But after that experience, it's almost like I felt like I had taken, like maybe I was suffocating, the best way I can
Yeah.
describe it, that I was suffocating. And that was a moment where I felt like I got so much oxygen and so much wind and so much breath. And I felt like I kind of had I guess you could say like a new lease of life, but I didn't realize it was possible to um, stuff that down so far and so deep for so long and
Yeah.
not even realize that, the other part of that is you can only suppress that for so long before it's gonna spill out somewhere. You're gonna express
Yeah.
it somewhere, and most of the time that comes out in a fit of rage, in a fit of anger, because you're not, that particular need or whatever is not being met, or that outlet for expression, it's
Yeah.
not being met. Or if there's the outlet of expression, then you know it's important that those things are not weaponized, right? Because whenever that expression is
Yeah.
weaponized, that takes it to a whole another level,
Yeah.
and there's just so many of these things that we're facing and we're dealing with, you know.
Well,
Um, and yeah, go ahead.
no, I was just going to say, I think that you're bringing up a really interesting point, which gets back to the men's health issue, which is and the healthcare system the way that it is. There are various screening tools that mental health providers have that helps them to diagnose depression or anxiety, and they are geared, oddly enough, to flag symptoms in women, but not in men. And these screening tools frequently ask things like, do you have feelings of worthlessness? Or do you cry a lot? And what you just highlighted is most men, most men will not say that they cry a lot because they don't. And most women are going to be more open about their emotions and they will cry. And so what happens is guys who are smart enough to go to a mental health person or even to get flagged by a teacher in school, for example, who might notice a behavior of a boy, they're gonna notice things like just what you said, anger. Or for men, for older men, not older, but older working age men, that they spend a lot more time at work than they used to because that's the way that they're dealing with their depression or their anxiety. Or they start self-medicating. They start drinking or start taking drugs to help them deal with the emotions that they can't let go. And so they don't get flagged as having a mental health issue. They get sent to anger management. And that's not it. Not every guy is as lucky as you were to have found that group that unlocked the emotions that had to get out. So many of us try to deal with them because we've been told to man up. So we're not going to talk about them, especially not with our partner, because we want to be there for her. And you couldn't talk about it with your other siblings because they're going through the same thing. And so it's a tragic situation. So we're trying to work on creating some screening tools that will actually flag and will say, look, okay, are you overworking? Are you working a lot more than you used to? Are you finding yourself angry at everybody around you? Are you exploding? Are you drinking more? Those kinds of things. Those are quite often symptoms of anxiety or depression in men that are not getting looked at properly.
Wow.
So,
Wow. That's really interesting. This is, I don't know. This for me is so in a lot of ways very enlightening. Because you just assume, being on the outside looking in, that the healthcare system is just what it is, and it's just designed the way it is, and everybody's going to be able to get what's essential and necessary to help them recover, be that physically or mentally. And I think even sometimes we minimize the mental side,
yeah.
I guess, not
Exactly.
realizing that it is the mental side is what plays into a lot of times me doing or not doing what I should, or what I should
Yeah.
do. You
Yeah.
know, wow, this is wow. I don't even know how to just conceptualize just the notion of something that you said, like a tool is there, but it's basically, well, I will say an effective tool, but effective only to a degree because it's
Yeah.
leaving out an entire group of individuals who, at an alarming rate based on the statistics, need more attention.
Yeah.
And I can't stress how important I believe that this work is. And um, the organizations and everything that you do. And I know that you have a website, and I also know that you have what is called the Healthy Family Show. That's your podcast.
Yep. Yep.
That you have. And you listen, I'm encouraging you who are watching this, who are listening to this podcast, who are going to watch this podcast, or wherever you're going to listen to it. If you listen to the audio version, I'm encouraging you to check out this Healthy Family Show, this podcast that is available. And can you tell us your website, healthymen.org? Tell us a little bit about
Sure.
that.
Well, healthymen.org is exactly that. It's healthymen.org. And you can find out all sorts of information about the course that I mentioned, the Certified Men's Health Educator. That's the certification course. And you can get in touch with us through that website. There's also Mr. Dad, mrdad.com, mrdad.com. It was not even my idea. A friend of mine came up with that one years and years ago. And that's where all my fatherhood stuff is. Can I have time for just one more interesting little
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah, absolutely.
When you're talking about the tests and things like that, quite often when I talk about men's health, women will say, well, it's only now that drugs are being tested on women and that women are part of clinical trials. And it's true. I mean, it's not true that it's just now. It's been going on for the past couple of decades that a lot more women are involved in clinical trials for drugs. But the reason why, we have to understand this, that the reason why tests were not being done on drugs or men were being the ones who were in all the clinical trials was because the doctors and the researchers did not want to harm women. So they didn't put them into the drugs so that they couldn't, and it was a good-hearted attempt to protect women. And it ended up that we now have to go and redo all those trials because women react differently to drugs because they're smaller or have higher levels of fat in the body or whatever it is, that they react differently. So we need to do that. But it wasn't because men are bad or men were trying to hurt women. It was because we were trying to protect women that they didn't do that. So I think it's when pushing back on things. And I used to get people pushing back all the time about, well, what are you writing these books about fathers for? Nobody cares about that. Women are the ones who need the help. Well, no, men, a lot of men want the help, but there's nothing out there. You say, men wouldn't buy it. Well, men don't buy fatherhood books because there aren't any. So that's why I'm gonna write some. So
exactly.
And you just want people to think a little bit more broadly before you just start saying, well, this is the way that it is. Think about why it is the way that it is and how it got there. And it may not have been the perfect way that we would do it now, but there was some logic to it.
Right. No answer is always a perfect answer. And a lot of times things are well intended. I often use this phrase when I'm talking to people, and evaluating someone's behavior. Since we don't know what's in a person's head, sometimes we have to realize that execution does not always reveal intention, right?
No.
I execute, but my execution, even on my best day, the stuff I even do well, I'm not going to always even execute my best stuff very well, or in some cases I do very good, but there's always going to be room for opportunity. But if I only just look at it from the lens of my perception or my perspective of your execution, I will sometimes assign an intention to you that is not accurate. And that's a dynamic that we have. And so, man, this is This subject matter is so exhaustive, because a lot of times when we hear about the term men's health comes up. I imagine that a man is hearing most men when they hear the term men's health, there's automatically this thing, this fear almost. One person was saying, hey, you know, a lot of times men don't go to get checked out, blah blah blah, and all things. Of course, you mentioned, what the reasons why some of that is, but then of course we know sometimes there's that internal battle. What if there's
Right.
something wrong?
Right.
Uh,
Exactly.
what if there's something that you know, and somehow you trick yourself into thinking, well, if I don't find out about it, then it won't necessarily impact me or won't affect me. And health doesn't work that way. Right?
I mean, you think about if you were sitting down with your kids, and you would say to your kid, that's magical thinking. You're imagining somehow that if you ignore it, it'll just go away. Sometimes that works, but if you're bleeding, you probably should do something about that. Or if you've got a pain or something growing on your body, no, it's not going to go away by itself. That's why we have doctors. These people go to school for a long time to learn how to figure out what this stuff, and let them do their job. And
Yeah.
the overall message I think I want to lead people with about men's health is that asking for help, going to the doctor, is a sign of strength. It's not a sign of weakness. And we have a tendency, partly because of man up and partly just because of maybe the way that we are, maybe the way that we're born. We tend to do less of that. But asking for help is a sign of strength. That means that you want to be there for the people that you love and care about. And you can't. If you don't take good care of yourself, you cannot be there for them. It's like the thing with the airplane. If you're ever on an airplane, if the oxygen masks come down, you put it on on yourself first before you help the people you're with, because if you can't breathe, you can't help anybody else.
Very true.
Put the mask on, take a deep breath, go to the doctor, get checked out, and then come home and play with your kids.
Yeah. So this is, I've had fun with this conversation. Well, I hate to even use the term fun, but I've really enjoyed thoroughly this conversation, and I believe it's a necessary and essential conversation that needs to continue. Funny thing is, we're actually preparing for a men's conference that we're actually getting ready to do actually next week, and we're going to be having like a men's only panel. And one of the things that we're going to be stressing, really to the men is, I really want us to understand something I learned, early on. Of course, my children are adults now too. We have three. We have one older son, he's 23, and then we have a set of boy-girl twins that are 22. All have the same birthday. How about that?
Wow.
And and both of my boys are actually serving in the Air Force. The oldest is actually based in Saudi Arabia at the Prince Sultan base.
Oh, boy.
So in the middle of action. Then the other one, he's based in Nebraska, but he's got a little security detail that he's done periodically on Air Force too. And sometimes we have these conversations and we talk. And one of the things I try to encourage them to do is to say, hey, what I know is, I'm not in your shoes. I'm not experiencing what you're experiencing. You're seeing things that I probably never will see. I encourage them and I say, hey, we're not invincible. We are not, superheroes. We're not Marvel. And all those, things that, are put in our heads. I say, whatever services are available, counseling, whatever is made available to you, take advantage of what is available to you. You need to help it, all those things. You take advantage of what's available to you, because you have got to take care of yourself as a man. You cannot do what you need to do for anybody, like you just said, unless you do what's necessary and essential for yourself. After I had that experience with that men's event, I made it my business to be intentional about giving myself space at least once a year. I've kind of gotten into like a little bit more of a pattern with that, but at least once a year, to just give myself that space, to just go and just be and just breathe. Doesn't mean I'm not going to be responsible. I'm going to do anything outlandish or do anything extreme or do anything silly or stupid or irresponsible. But it does mean for a minute, I'm going to pull away. I'm going to take a break. I'm going to take a breather, and then I kind of do little things, that I found the things that help me, to kind of recover. By nature, I'm very introverted. So I don't know, there's something for me that I love to just go and be by the water periodically. Just go be by the ocean and listen to the sound of the waves and watch the moonlight on the water at night, at the beach, watch the sun, sunrise, at the beach or by the lake or by the waterfall. And I found those things that really kind of help me, in different spaces. And this is not something that I do, just when I feel like, okay, I'm just really, really stressed. No, this is the things that I try to be intentional about. Like, hey, every now and then, I just need to give myself a break. I need to say it without, any issues. I need to say I need a break. That's not to
Yeah.
say you don't or the other person doesn't. I know I have enough awareness to know I've kind of reached sort of a maximum, sort of a limit. There's kind of been some things that are happening that I've not been able to control. So I'm gonna, control what I can control, and I'm gonna give myself a little bit of space, even if it's just for, an hour or so drive down the road, to just go and be at a space that brings, in nature somewhere that brings calm or, just allows me to clear my head or clear my thoughts for a moment.
Yeah.
So that's what we're encouraging. We're encouraging, to take care of yourself. You know, you can be all you can be if you do what's necessary. You find out what's necessary, what for yourself, especially mentally, to be able to get into the space. So those are the things that we're really going to be encouraging the men to do. To really just let's come back to understanding what it's like to be a man and still be human, still be,
Yep.
an individual that has needs, and really to find the proper way to manage those things. So, Armin, I've appreciated your time and being with us today and sharing with us. And one more time, y'all, just make sure you check out the Healthy Family Show and make sure that you take a moment and you go over there. I love that website, to healthymen.org, or mrdads.com. All right. Please go and check out those resources that are available. Do what's necessary to help yourself. Those of you who may be in the healthcare industry who are a little bit more interested in
Yep.
some of the things that you've heard, uh, go over there, check it out, see how you can get involved in being a solution to the problem that we see existing. Because I don't think we can have too many people in the space giving the answers that are needful. All right.
Yeah. Absolutely.
So, guys,
Demetrius, thanks. It's a pleasure.
yes, sir. So, everybody, thank you so much. We appreciate you for being a part of the Facts and Fatherhood podcast. Again, don't forget, guys, subscribe to the channel. Make sure you hit the notification bell so you can know when there's a new episode that's posting. That we have a new episode that's posting every single week. All right, every single week. And our main space where we are is on the Kingdom Purpose TV network, where we are there every single Saturday. That's going to be 12 p.m. Eastern is when that podcast shows. But we're everywhere. We're all over. We're Apple Podcasts, we're Spotify, we're Roku, we're iHeartRadio. You can pick us up anywhere. All right. So do me a favor, subscribe, like, share the podcast, share it with someone, because I'm sure you have someone in your life who can benefit from what we shared today on this podcast. I'm your host again, Demetrius. I just want you to love being a father the way I love being a father. And let's say it again together, man. We are just men who are doing our best and working every day to make our best better. Thank you again for joining us, and we will see you the next time on Facts and Fatherhood.